As we've been reporting, the House of Representatives was not in session Thursday. The decision was made in light of intelligence about a potential plot to breach the Capitol. An intelligence bulletin released earlier this week cited an unidentified group of militia extremists' plans. Officials reportedly believe they may have been motivated by the pro-Trump conspiracy theory movement known as QAnon. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi referred to this when speaking to reporters Thursday.
The threat of all the president's men out there, we have to ensure with our security that we are safe enough to do our job, but not impeding. I live in San Francisco.
The Capitol Police Department says it has enhanced security as a precaution. There was also a more visible presence of National Guard troops around the Capitol complex Thursday. For more, let's bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Hi there, Catherine. So for weeks, intelligence analysts have been monitoring chatter among QAnon believers about March 4th. What does law enforcement think they were plotting? And so far, Catherine, have there been any signs of actual activity?
Well, Elaine, based on our reporting here at CBS News, there appears to have been two streams of intelligence. The first gathered by the FBI at the end of February, and then another stream really within the last 48 to 72 hours. They laid out a plot that was designed to take control of the Capitol and then also to target Democratic lawmakers. And there was also discussion of trying to get thousands of people to Washington, D.C. to affect this on a date that conspiracy theorists see as the traditional inauguration date. But the discussion of getting thousands to Washington, D.C. was described by the FBI and Homeland Security as aspirational. And you know what that means. That means that this was a lot of discussion about what they hoped to do, but investigators did not see any concrete evidence that they had the tools they needed to move people to Washington to commit an additional act of violence.
You know, Catherine, we've been talking about these militia groups like the Oath Keepers, but does the threat extend beyond that?
I'm glad you asked that question, because when you dig deeper into this FBI and Homeland Security bulletin, what you see is a discussion of the militias, but what it says at the end is that the most likely nexus for violence in the future is twofold. One is small cell groups, but especially lone wolf. And lone wolf is a term that we came to use sort of synonymously after 9/11 when we talked about Americans who were radicalized by al-Qaeda and then later by ISIS. So these are individuals for whom it's the most difficult for FBI investigators to disrupt, because often they are working in isolation. So there aren't communications to pick up, social media to pick up, any kind of dialogue with others that might tip off investigators to their plans. So I'm glad you asked that. It's twofold. They're looking at militia groups, and then they're also looking at the prospect of lone wolf actors executing additional acts of violence.
Well, Catherine, I understand you have some new information about the pipe bombs that were placed near the Democratic and Republican National Committees on January 5th. What can you tell us about that? I know that's something that you've been watching closely as well.
Well, CBS News was first to break the reporting that pipe bombs were discovered outside the Republican National Committee and Democratic National Committee just within that critical window between 12:45 and 1:15 on the day of the riots, January 6th. Just today, late this afternoon, we obtained this law enforcement bulletin. It's a special type of bulletin because it combines intelligence with forensic findings as well as explosives analysis. And this report looks specifically at the two pipe bombs. And while it lays out all of the components of these pipe bombs, they were two viable devices. It does have something new and very interesting. What it shows is that there's no evidence the pipe bombs had a secondary method for detonation. So, for example, a cell phone that would allow someone to detonate the device, let's say, the following morning on January 6th. So based on the evidence in the report, I spoke to a former ATF investigator who said all of that suggests because there was a 60-minute kitchen timer. Remember that? All of it suggests that if they had been set, they were designed to go off on January 5th. And you understand why that timeline is so important, because it's the day before the riots, and it creates more questions as to if and how it was connected to the breach on the 6th.
Right, and as you've said, I mean, it really raises the question about the level of sophistication and planning by those who may have been involved, and not just sort of a spur of the moment
sort of
activity
a pickup game. Yeah, exactly.
Catherine, right, yeah. Let me ask you this. Is it clear, Catherine, why the House shut down on Thursday, but not the Senate?
It's not clear to me, so I don't want to give you a lot of speculation about that. But I think what is clear from our reporting, and this came from the acting chief of police for the Capitol Hill Police, is that they have seen this incredible spike in threats targeting lawmakers. What's not clear to us is, again, this, we talk about this so much, and I'm glad we do on your show, the difference between aspirational and operational. We don't know how many of these threats are kind of wishful thinking and people kicking around ideas, or whether this is really serious and they've got the goods to execute an attack on a lawmaker. But the fact that the chatter is so high certainly goes into this larger picture about why we've seen security ramped up around the Capitol complex the way that we have, as a visible deterrent to a small cell like a militia group or this lone wolf actor.
Catherine, based on your reporting, do you anticipate a reduction of the security measures in place on Capitol Hill anytime soon?
Based on my experience, and I've been covering this area for 2 decades, I would say that it's going to take a lot more courage to pull back the fences and send away the National Guard than it took to put them there, unfortunately, in the first place. And I think that will be very difficult while we're in this heightened threat environment, even if it's not clear whether these threats are credible and actionable. Also, what will it take for us to really understand how things fell through the cracks on January 6th? We've just come through days of hearings, and still there are these very significant gaps and conflicts based on the timeline and sort of who was on first, who was on second, who was making the call, what committee, all of these things. And I think in a practical sense, once that is resolved further and there's a decision on how they will proceed in the future in a heightened threat environment, all of those would be positive factors that would go to the call by many lawmakers to see the fences rolled back and the National Guard dispersed.
All right, Catherine Herridge in Washington for us. Catherine, it's always so valuable to have your reporting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.